More than 100 representatives are expected to speak at the two-day emergency meeting. General Assembly President, in his opening remarks, condemned all attacks targeting all civilians. He urged member states not to further fan the flames of hate and called for an immediate and unconditional humanitarian ceasefire and the opening of aid corridors to save lives in Gaza. United Nations World Food Programme's chief has criticized the strict checks on aid trucks at the Rafah crossing from Egypt to Gaza. She called the bureaucracy quote-unquote insane and said the rigorous procedures slow down the flow of aid. The chief added that prior to the conflict escalation, the region used to see about 400 trucks cross every day. She emphasized people in Gaza are starving to death, while just a dribble of aid trucks have made their way through. The spokesperson for the U.S. National Security Council has said that he saw quote-unquote zero evidence that the family of an Al Jazeera journalist in Gaza were targeted and killed by Israel in response to the network's coverage in the region. Now, this comes after Al Jazeera said that the wife, son and daughter of one of its correspondents in Gaza were killed in an Israeli airstrike. Al Jazeera also said that other members of the family were buried under the rubble. The network broadcast live footage of the journalist crying as he saw family members laying lifeless. The White House has clarified that President Joe Biden's comments on what motivated the Hamas attack on Israel were misinterpreted. While President Joe Biden has been referring to regional inclusion of Israel and ties with Saudi Arabia, some sections within the media has referred to that as a reference to the India-Middle East-Europe corridor that was announced during the G20 summit in New Delhi. Israel has deployed more weapons at its southern border and its military bases. There have intensified guarding. Large numbers of Merkava tanks, armored vehicles and soldiers are assembling in the border area. Now, Merkava tanks are famous for its defensive performance. The tanks stationed at the border are defensive shelter against drone attacks. Armed helicopters are patrolling the skies. On the ground, temporary checkpoints have been set up to check vehicles passing by. Israeli tanks and infantry on Thursday raided the northern Gaza Strip, and Israel has said that the move was part of preparations for the next stages of combat, in which it plans a ground offensive in Gaza. European Union leaders have called for pauses in Israeli bombing and Hamas rocket attacks to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. Now, this comes after days of wrangling that highlighted divisions within the bloc over the broader Israel-Gaza conflict. The summit has been leaders' first in-person meeting since the deadly October 7th assault on Israel by militant group Hamas, which has prompted Israel to bombard and blockade Hamas-run Gaza Strip. A manhunt is underway at the moment for U.S. Army reservist Robert Card, who is wanted in connection with the murder of 18 people and wounding about 30 more in two separate shootings. The attacks took place at a bowling alley and a bar in Lewiston. A wide area around Lewiston was locked down during the tense search. The authorities have erected roadblocks, have ordered schools and businesses to be closed, and told residents to stay indoors. Hundreds of officers from an array of agencies, including the US Coast Guard, joined the search, and neighboring Canada said its border officers are on high alert. Indian security forces have killed 5 Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorists along the line of control on Thursday evening. Earlier in the day, Pakistani troopers opened unprovoked firing on Indian border security force posts on Thursday, and that was around 8 p.m. local time. A BSF soldier and 4 civilians were injured in the firing and have been shifted to a nearby hospital for treatment. Shells were recovered by locals around their villages in fields. Now, the same have now been sent for further investigation. The US military struck 2 facilities in eastern Syria used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and affiliated groups. Now, this is according to US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. The strikes were ordered by President Joe Biden. He added that the strikes were a response to a series of ongoing and mostly unsuccessful attacks against US personnel in Iraq and Syria that began on October 17th. According to a senior US official, the strikes took place at roughly 4:30 a.m. local time on Friday near Abu Kamal. This is a Syrian town at the borders with Iraq. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang opening a rare visit to Washington, voiced hope for more stable relations between the world's 2 largest economies. Foreign Minister Wang calls for quote-unquote cooperation that will benefit both sides so that US and China's relations stabilize and return to the track of healthy, stable and sustainable development. Foreign Minister Wang is likely to push for the United States to ease back on restrictions on advanced semiconductors aimed at stopping China from using the chips in military applications. Now, Wang's visit signals the resumption of more frequent high-level diplomatic and working group exchanges between the 2 sides. China's former Premier Li Keqiang has died of a sudden heart attack aged 68. The former Chinese Premier and head of China's cabinet served under President Xi Jinping for a decade from 2013, retiring in March. A career bureaucrat who spoke fluent English, he had voiced support for economic reforms during his time in office. He was praised for helping to steer the country through the global financial crisis relatively unscathed. Russian-installed Donetsk mayor Alexei Kulimzin has said that a residential building has been damaged in an Ukrainian shelling of the city of Donetsk. According to reports, an apartment building endured a direct hit, while 2 more blocks were also damaged. Russia's state agency has reported that according to preliminary data from operational services, the shelling was carried out using cluster munitions. The city of Donetsk has been under Russian control since 2014, but Ukrainian troops continue to hold positions on its outskirts and regularly comes under artillery fire. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that a decision to extend Moscow's participation in the International Space Station until 2028 is a temporary solution, as the country needs to develop its own national orbital station. According to President Putin, Russia's specialists have begun to develop the technical characteristics of Moscow's orbital stations. President Putin's remark comes after his visit to an exhibition of promising space industry projects. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for quote-unquote unity in an address to top European Union leaders amid the war in West Asia. President Zelensky went on to say, quote-unquote, the enemies of freedom are interested in bringing the free world to the second front. The 27 leaders were joined via video call by President Zelensky, where the Ukrainian president said that he is grateful for the support in Ukraine's war against Russia, but called for more sanctions against Kremlin. Japan's parliamentary vice minister steps down over affair. Nataro Yamada is a member of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. Yamada, 56-year-old, is the first to have quit among ministers since Prime Minister Fumio Kishida reshuffling his cabinet in mid-September. The Japanese government has appointed Akiko Honda, a lawmaker, to replace Yamada. Honda, 52-year-old, is the only woman among state ministers and parliamentary vice ministers. At least 5 people have been shot dead at a home in North Carolina. According to authorities, officers were called to a home near Clinton on Thursday after reports of a homicide. 5 people were found dead with gunshot wounds. The sheriff's office has said that the deceased included 1 woman and 4 men. A suspect into the killings has not been identified and investigations are currently ongoing. This comes just hours after at least 18 people were killed at 2 separate locations in the state of Maine. Britain's King Charles III will travel to Kenya later this month for a state visit, in a trip that is full of symbolism. The state visit from October 31st to November 3rd will be Charles's first to a Commonwealth nation since he succeeded his mother last year. But in Kenya, people are gearing up to protest the royal visit over what they say are crimes committed by British forces. The former colony gained independence in 1963, but continues to have British forces deployed on its soil. More than 5,000 claimants are demanding compensation for a devastating fire that they believe was started by British soldiers on exercises in the county back in 2021. At least 27 people are dead and 4 others are missing after a powerful hurricane, Otis, slammed Mexico's Pacific coast. Otis hit the beach resort city as a Category 5 storm early on Wednesday and tore through the southern state of Guerrero. According to the officials, heavy rain has submerged cars, cut road and air access, leaving a trail of wreckage across the city. As per Mexico's defense ministry, over 8,000 members of the Army, Air Force and National Guard have been dispatched for help. Wildfires in multiple spots across Bolivia has pushed authorities to declare a disaster in at least one municipality and suspend classes in the country's largest cities. Santa Cruz has already suspended classes, but the Ministry of Education has now suspended classes in the capital of La Paz. Now, several sectors have asked the government to declare a national emergency due to the fires and severe drought plaguing the Andean nation. However, the Ministry of Defense assured that it was not necessary. The government has reported that rain has decreased the intensity of the fires. Authorities attribute most of the fires to farmers who burn weeds and grasslands during the dry season. Abu Dhabi is accelerating mangrove planting using drones. Now, this is part of its ambitious fight against climate change. UAE plans to plant over 10 million mangrove seedlings by the year 2030. According to environmental tech company Distant Imagery, only 40% of the planted seeds survive and grow into seedlings. As per United Nations, the success rate of artificial mangrove restoration project can be quite low. However, older mangrove stores more carbon than newer ones. According to Climate Ministry in the Gulf country, mangroves capture over 40,000 tons of carbon dioxide annually. Now, 2 new coral reefs and 2 unexplored sea mounds have been discovered in the Galapagos Islands. Now, these newly identified cold water reefs are situated at depths ranging from 370 to 420 meters. The discovery expands our understanding of deep reefs within the Galapagos Islands Marine Reserve. They exhibit a rich diversity of stony coral species, suggesting that they have likely been forming and supporting marine biodiversity for thousands of years. Now, some news from the world of business. Core consumer inflation in Japan's capital, Tokyo, considered a leading indicator of nationwide trends, unexpectedly accelerated in October, a sign of broadening price pressures that may keep alive expectations of near-term end to ultra-low interest rates. The data reinforces expectations the Bank of Japan will revise up its inflation forecasts when it produces fresh quarterly projections at next week's policy meeting. Now, the increase, which was faster than 2.5% gain in September, casts doubt on the central bank's view that inflation will slow in coming months as cost-push pressure dissipates. Boeing's defense business is proving harder to turn around than executive initially predicted, with supplier errors and high manufacturing costs contributing to $1.7 billion in losses this year on programs like the next Air Force One and NASA's Starliner capsule. Despite absorbing about $4.4 billion in losses in 2022, which executives said would lower the risk of future cost overruns, the unit has seen little improvement this year. In the first 3 quarters of 2023, that is this year, China's Huawei Technologies experienced a 2.4% increase in revenue, reaching 456.6 billion yuan, or that is about $62.4 billion, while profits surged by 177.8%. Now, this growth can be attributed in part to the sale of its Honor smartphone unit in November of 2020. Huawei smartphone sales saw a resurgence in the 3rd quarter, thanks to the release of the Mate 60 series. However, the main drivers behind the revenue growth were the digital power, cloud, and auto parts businesses.